After Star Wars was released, it became apparent that my story, however many films it took to tell, was only one of thousands that could be told about the characters who inhabited its galaxy. But these were not the stories that I was destined to tell. Instead, they would spring from the imagination of other writers, inspired by the glimpse of a galaxy that Star Wars provided. Today, it is an amazing, if unexpected, legacy of Star Wars that so many gifted writers are contributing new stories to that saga. George Lucas from the introduction of A Splinters of the Mind's Eye, 1996.
Welcome back, friends, to the Skywalker Files from a certain point of view. I'm Rockwell, your host, your guide, and today, your fellow inmate in one of the strangest corners of the Star Wars expanded universe. If you're still with me after episode 1, congratulations. Either you're genuinely curious about Star Wars expanded universe, or you enjoy the sound of my voice far more than is healthy. Either way, welcome. In our last episode, we took a bird's eye view of the expanded universe, its rise, its fall, and the glory days of blue skinned tacticians and homicidal blobs. Today, we're going underground. Literally. Darth Maul Lockdown is a novel that answers the deeply unnecessarily, but strangely compelling question: what if Star Wars did a prison thriller? And not just any prison. We're talking about a zero tolerance death pit orbiting a dead moon. Your bunkmate might be a sociopath, a force worshipping cultist, or something with pincers. In this episode, we descend into a place few dare to imagine: Cog Hive 7, a maximum security prison where entertainment is mandatory and violence is the currency. This isn't a tale of galactic conquest or Jedi prophecy. This is a story about control, about what happens when you tell a Sith not to use the dark side. It's dark, it's brutal, and somehow it's one of the most compelling explorations of Darth Maul we've ever gotten. So strap in, keep your hands inside your cell at all times, and if someone offers you a knife, make sure you're not already bleeding. Grab your shiv, hide your midi-chlorian levels, and remember, no force powers allowed.
Maul Lockdown was released in January of 2014, just months before the Great Canon Purge of April that same year, when Lucasfilm, newly under Disney's direction, declared most of the expanded universe legends. So, in many ways, Lockdown was one of the last books of the Old Order, the tail end of a timeline that had become, by that point, a small galaxy's worth of storytelling. Now, just to be clear, this book is not considered canon in the current Star Wars continuity, but that does not make it irrelevant. In fact, Lockdown manages to do something very few Star Wars novels attempt. It gives us a fully contained, brutal, and psychological portrait of Darth Maul. It's untethered from the usual Jedi versus Sith melodrama, and for that, we can thank Joe Schreiber. Now, Schreiber is an interesting case in the pantheon of Star Wars authors. He comes from the world of horror fiction, and he brought that exact sensibility to Star Wars. You might know his name from Death Troopers, the infamous Star Wars zombie novel, or Red Harvest, which was basically Dead Space meets Sith alchemy. So, yes, Schreider's Star Wars books are not for the faint of heart or the easily grossed out, but with Lockdown, he pulls back slightly on the gore and leans into something more cerebral. The horror here isn't reanimated corpses, it's confinement, it's control, it's tension between what Maul is and what he's not allowed to be. And that's where the timeline becomes important. Lockdown takes place before the Phantom Menace, during the final stages of Maul's training under Darth Sidious. He's still a secret, still operating in the shadows. This is the era when the Sith are playing the long game, manipulating, maneuvering, and preparing to strike from beneath the surface. Maul's mission is simple in concept: locate an arms dealer named Iram Radik and eliminate him. But the catch, because of course there's a catch, is that Radik is believed to be inside Cog Hive 7, an inescapable prison moon filled with killers, monsters, and weapons grade lunatics. Sidious sends Maul in alone. No lightsaber, no force usage, no backup. He's not just hunting Radik, he's proving himself. This book isn't about the Sith rising in power, it's about training wheels. The crawl before the carnage, a test of discipline in the galaxy's most undisciplined place. You'd think a prison novel starring Darth Maul wouldn't need much of an ensemble cast, but one of the strengths of Lockdown is how it throws characters who are twisted, tragic, and always ready to kill each other at a moment's notice together. At this point in the timeline, Maul is a creature of pure potential. He's all discipline, all rage, and absolutely desperate to prove himself worthy of Sidious's grand plan. What's fascinating here is that we're seeing Maul without his traditional crutches. No double bladed saber, no force powers allowed. This is Maul stripped down, surgically focused, and deeply repressed, which, as we know, always goes well for Sith. He's undercover. He's pretending to be somebody else. He's adapting, watching, calculating, and waiting for the right moment to unleash chaos bottled up inside of him. And let me tell you, there's a lot of chaos. And what makes Maul truly compelling in this book is that he's not the smartest person in the prison. He's not the most charismatic. In many ways, he's a shark thrown into a pit of other sharks. Only these ones cheat. Which brings us to Aram Radik, the target of Maul's mission. Aram Radik is an arms dealer so secretive and powerful that people debate whether he's real or a myth. He's the MacGuffin of the story, but he's also the commentary on the nature of power. Everyone wants to find him, destroy him, or be him. But in the end, Radik represents something deeper. The idea that in a galaxy ruled by shadows, even the name can be a weapon. And then there's Warden Dakarai Blur. If you're expecting a loud, cartoonishly evil prison warden, barking orders and swinging a stun baton, Lockdown has other plans. Dakari Blur is cold, controlled, and absolutely terrifying. She runs Cog Hive 7 not with bombast, but with precision. She doesn't scream, she whispers. And when she whispers, people bleed. You see, Cog Hive 7 isn't just a prison, it's an investment. Under Blur's direction, the facility has become a blood soaked arena, complete with holographic broadcast network. Inmates are encouraged, i.e., forced, to fight in brutal matches for off world spectators, and the profits go straight into her pocket. But what makes her truly chilling is that she believes in what she's doing. Not all prisoners in Maul Lockdown are murderers, gladiators, or Siths in disguise. Some are just people who've made a few too many dangerous choices and are now paying dearly for them. Take Artigan and his teenage son Egon, for instance. Their presence in Coghive 7 is one of the novel's most disturbing ironies. They're not there because they belong, they're there because Artigan knows something. Specifically, he's one of the very few people alive who knows the true identity of Radik, the phantom arms dealer Maul has been sent to uncover. What makes their dynamic so compelling is the emotional weight it adds to a story that could easily collapse under its own brutality. Schreiber gives us a father and son trying impossibly to survive, to hold on to some fragment of humanity. What happens when you drop a Sith apprentice into the deadliest prison in the galaxy and tell him to keep a low profile? Well, that's the central premise of Maul Lockdown, a brutal, bloody Star Wars horror thriller masquerading as an undercover mission. The novel opens with Darth Maul already inside the prison, under an alias. There's no grand entry, no prelude. He's already there, already shackled, already calculating. The story doesn't build the trap, it starts inside it. Welcome to Coghive 7. Let's talk setting. Coghive 7 is not your average detention center. It's a privately run, profit driven prison built deep inside an asteroid. A forgotten place run by forgotten people. Officially, it doesn't exist. And it's not just a prison, it's an entertainment enterprise. The inmates fight each other in death matches beamed across the galaxy to eager viewers on the dark holonet. Gambling syndicates place bets as high rolling degenerates sip spice martinis, watching someone's spine get rearranged. It's as if someone took the Roman Colosseum, shoved it into space, and slapped a premium content subscription on it. Maul's mission: find Aram Radik, a reclusive black market weapons dealer whose identity is so well protected that even Darth Sidious doesn't know what he looks like. Radik is said to be hidden somewhere in the prison, or possibly running it, and Maul's job is to flush him out and secure a shipment of detonators for the coming war. Now, bear in mind, this is pre Phantom Menace. He's not the snarling rage beast of the Clone Wars, nor is he the philosophical tactician we would see hinted at in Solo. He's a weapon, a tool of Sidious, a blunt instrument pretending to be precise. And Sidious, in his infinite cruelty, tells Maul under no circumstances is he allowed to use the Force. So we have Darth Maul in a pit of killers, trying not to look like Darth Maul. This goes about as well as you'd expect. From the very first pages, Lockdown establishes its tone, and that is visceral, unrelenting, and unapologetically grim. Schreiber doesn't flirt with horror, he grabs it by the throat. The fights are described with grisly detail. Bones snap, teeth shatter, blades carve, and blood sprays. This isn't stylized lightsaber dueling. This is gladiator savage with steel and sinew flying, and yet it doesn't feel gratuitous because underneath all the gore is something sharper, a critique of systems that profit from cruelty. Coghive 7 exists because people with money find death entertaining. The inmates are there to be consumed, chewed up by the invisible audience, and spat out into a pit. Maul may be the most dangerous man in the room, but he's still just another cog in the machine, at least until he decides otherwise. Everyone in the story is pretending to be someone they're not. The lines between inmate and staff, predator and prey, victim and executioner, they're constantly blurring at times. It's not even clear who's really in control. And then there's Maul himself. He enters the prison thinking he's the apex predator, but the deeper he digs, the more he realizes that this isn't a test of strength, it's a test of purpose. He starts to unravel, not because he's afraid, but because the structure of the mission forces him to question things like why is Sidious really sending him here, and why prohibit the Force. Maul starts to suspect there's a second layer to the game, and in true Sith fashion, he's absolutely right. And then there's the mystery of Aram Radiq, which simmers in the background for most of the novel like a sinister rumor. You hear his name long before you see him. Some inmates think he's a myth. Others whisper that he's the prison itself, that he watches through the vents, listens to the screams, and when you do finally meet him, no spoilers, but let's just say this: Radiq is not what Maul expects, nor what we expect, and yet, in hindsight, it makes perfect sense. Where does Lockdown fit in the grand scheme of the EU and its timeline? Well, chronologically, it's set before the events of the Phantom Menace. We're in the final days of the pre Clone Wars Republic, an era of bureaucratic rot, corruption, and increasing shadows. Sidious is moving his pieces across the galactic chessboard, quietly laying the groundwork for the fall of the Jedi and the rise of the Empire. Maul is officially in training. Sidious hasn't revealed him to the galaxy yet. There's no lightsabers in public, no Sith lightning, just whispered orders in the dark, and assignments that require silence, not spectacle. This timing is key because it gives us a version of Maul we rarely see, not the killer on display, but the weapon in development, a Maul who is still being shaped, tested, sharpened, and what better whetstone than a prison designed to break monsters. Now, to the wider expanded universe. Maul Lockdown is very much a standalone story and structure, but it's part of a larger unofficial duology. Um, Darth Maul Shadowhunter is the other book by Michael Reeves, which follows Maul tracking down a holocron thief on Coruscant, which takes place right before the Phantom Menace starts. As for the other connections, we have the Black Sun Crime Syndicate, which gets a brief mention, grounding this story in the seedy underworld. The Black Sun also makes mentions in the Han Solo trilogy and then shows up in force in Shadows of the Empire. There's the influence of Darth Sidious is ever present in this, which is his presence is threading the story for the larger Sith underpinning of the rest of the prequel trilogy and other books like Labyrinth of Evil. And then if you squint, you can see the narrative pre echoes of the Death Star prison levels from Jedi Knight, or the brutalist corridors and hidden experiments and moral fog that lingers in the Dark Horse era of comics. That said, Lockdown plays well as a bottle episode in the EU timeline. You don't need the history degree in Star Wars to follow it, but if you do have one, there's plenty of lore tucked away in the shadows. And perhaps most importantly, it's quietly critiquing the Republic's moral decay. That a place like Coghive 7 can exist in the final years before Palpatine's rise is no accident. It's a red flag, one of many, and no one's paying attention except Sidious. So, how does Lockdown hold up? Let's be clear: Lockdown is not a comfort read. It's not about hope or redemption or a daring escape. There are no X Wings on the horizon, no twin suns, no plucky rebels, no lessons about friendship. There's a good chance the book ends with more dismembered limbs than characters who walk away intact. But that's exactly what makes it so compelling. In many ways, Lockdown is a Star Wars novel that tests the boundaries of what counts as a Star Wars novel. Joe Schreiber takes the language of the franchise, Sith, Holocron, Coruscant, spies, cartels, and rewrites it in the dialect of a prison horror thriller. It's claustrophobic, brutal, nihilistic, and yet it works. In its own twisted way, Lockdown is a mirror held up to the Republic itself, a place where institutions are failing, people are for sale, and darkness is entertained. Darth Maul has always been a figure of fascination, the Sith who should have been a footnote, but refused to die. And that brings us to the end of today's Descent into Darkness. We've journeyed through the guts of a prison designed by a madman, followed a Sith apprentice through the brutality and betrayal, and glimpsed the rotten heartbeat of a Republic teetering on the brink. Lockdown may be a tale of fist and fury, but it leaves us with far more questions than it answers about power, obedience, and just how much horror a man can endure before becoming the very thing he was trained to destroy. But next time we trade the blood-stained floors of Cog High 7 for something far more dangerous: politics. In our next episode, we'll dive into Cloak of Deception by James Luceno, a book that peels back the velvet curtain of the Galactic Senate and reveals the festering rot beneath the golden trim. We'll explore how Chancellor Valorum lost control, how Palpatine sharpened his smile, and how the Jedi became so blinded by diplomacy they failed to notice the storm gathering right at their door. If Lockdown was about brute force in a confined space, Cloak of Deception is about subtle moves across a vast board, deals, betrayals, and the kind of corruption that doesn't need lightsabers to destroy entire systems. So come back next time, dear listener, as we light a cigar with Masamita and watch democracy die, not with thunderous applause, but with committee vote. Until then, this has been the Skywalker Files. From a certain point of view, I've been your host, Rockwell, still wondering if Maul ever got the blood out from under his fingernails. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and may the Force be with you, especially if you ever find yourself in a cell across from a Zarbak with a blank stare and a vendetta. See you next time.